Kylian Mbappé could hear the roar of the crowd even as he lay flat on the turf. The searing pain in his right knee was sharp and unforgiving, and the stadium lights above him blurred into a mess of white and green. He gritted his teeth, clutching his leg as medics rushed toward him. The Champions League semifinal, the one that was supposed to solidify his legacy, had just ended for him in the worst way possible. 3 days later, the diagnosis was even worse than he feared. Torn ligaments. Minimum 6 months on the sidelines. But the part that scared him the most wasn't the recovery, it was the question the doctor left hanging in the air. Even if you recover, you may not get your speed back. Speed had always been Kylian's weapon. His identity. Who was he without it? Chapter 1. It was June when Kylian landed in Los Angeles. His agent insisted it was the perfect place to heal, both physically and mentally. Kylian wasn't so sure. LA felt too loud, too fast, but not in the way he liked. The sun was blinding, and the Hollywood Hills loomed above the city like they were judging him. Just relax, his agent had said. No one cares about football here. Kylian didn't believe that either. He couldn't go anywhere without someone shoving a phone in his face, asking for a selfie. He couldn't even go for a quiet jog without seeing some teenager wearing a PSG jersey with his name on the back. On his third night in LA, restless and unable to sleep, he went for a walk near the Venice Beach boardwalk. That's when he heard it, the unmistakable sound of a soccer ball ricocheting off concrete. He followed the sound down an alley lit by a single flickering street lamp. That's when he saw him. A kid, maybe 17 or 18, with dark curls and sharp eyes, wearing beat-up sneakers and an oversized hoodie. The ball was practically glued to his feet, flicking between his legs and off the brick wall with impossible control. The kid wasn't just good. He was ridiculous. Nice touch, Kylian called out. The kid stopped and turned. His eyes narrowed. Yeah. He rolled the ball toward Kylian. Let's see what you got. Kylian smirked. The kid had no idea who he was. Even better. He towed the ball and went for a quick step over, but the kid anticipated it, snatching the ball away with a back heel. Then, with a flick of his foot, he nutmegged Kylian and sent the ball spinning toward the wall. Kylian lunged, and his knee screamed in protest. He doubled over, clutching his leg. You good? The kid asked, picking up the ball. Kylian forced a smile through the pain. Yeah, just rusty. The kid shrugged. Happens. He tossed the ball toward Kylian, who caught it. What's your name? Kylian asked. Jaden. I'm Kylian. Yeah, no kidding, Jaden said with a smirk. I've seen you play. Kylian raised an eyebrow. And you still challenge me? Jaden grinned. You're not that scary. Chapter 2. Over the next few weeks, Kylian kept coming back. Jaden was always there, juggling the ball in that same alley. Kylian's knee was getting stronger, but his confidence was still shot. His legs weren't moving the way they used to. The explosive speed, the thing that made him different, was gone. You're thinking too much, Jaden said one night after Kylian botched a simple back heel. Kylian sighed. I'm trying to get it back. You don't need to get it back, Jaden said. You need to find something new. Jaden showed him a different kind of game, the street style. Less about speed, more about creativity and instinct. The way Jaden played was reckless and dangerous, but it was also beautiful. Kylian started to feel it too, the joy of the game without the weight of 1,000 cameras watching him. One night, after a particularly intense match, they sat on the curb sharing a bottle of water. So how'd you get so good? Kylian asked. Jaden hesitated. Then he said, I used to play for a youth team. Coach told me I was too wild, that I didn't follow the system. So you quit. Jaden's jaw tightened. Let's just say, I had other things to deal with. Chapter 3. It was 2 weeks before Kylian's planned return to Paris when Jaden didn't show up. Kylian texted him. No response. He searched the usual spots, the alley, the boardwalk. Nothing. Then Kylian ran into one of Jaden's friends. They took him, the kid said. The crew he used to run with. Who took him? Kylian asked. Some guys from his old neighborhood. They think he owes them. Kylian's heart hammered in his chest. He didn't even think. He just started running. His knee screamed, but he ignored it. He tracked Jaden's phone to an abandoned warehouse on the edge of the city. Inside, he found Jaden tied to a chair, surrounded by 3 guys built like linebackers. Kylian stepped into the light. Let him go. The leader of the group laughed. Or what? Kylian's heart was racing. His knee was throbbing. But the instinct, the hunger, was back. He spotted a ball on the ground. Game of one-on-one, Kylian said. If I win, you let him go. The leader laughed. And if you lose? Kylian smiled. I'm not gonna lose. Chapter 4. Kylian won. Of course he won. He didn't rely on his speed. He used what Jaden taught him. He played smart. He played creative. He played with heart. When it was over, the leader scowled, but he honored the deal. Jaden walked free. You really didn't have to do that, Jaden said as they walked out into the night. Kylian shrugged. Yeah, I did. Chapter 5. 3 weeks later, Kylian was back in Paris. His knee was healed. He was back to full training. But when he took the field for his comeback match, something was different. He wasn't relying on speed anymore. He pulled off a ridiculous backheel nutmeg to set up a goal, a move straight out of Jaden's playbook. Jaden's text came through just after the match. Not bad. But you're still not that scary. Kylian smiled. And for the first time in months, he felt like himself again. Chapter 6. It was 2 days after the comeback match, and Kylian was sitting on the balcony of his Paris apartment, scrolling through the flood of messages on his phone. Congratulations from teammates, praise from pundits, even a text from Neymar. Welcome back, King. Kylian should have felt on top of the world, but his mind kept drifting back to Jaden. He hadn't heard from him since the match. The last text was simple, almost too casual. Not bad. But you're still not that scary. Kylian smiled at the memory, but something felt off. Jaden didn't do casual. And he didn't disappear like this. Thinking too much again, Kylian muttered to himself. Just then, his phone buzzed with a call. Unknown number. He almost ignored it, but something made him answer. Kylian. He sat up straight. He knew that voice. Jaden? The line was crackly. Yeah. I need your help. What's going on? Kylian's pulse quickened. I screwed up. Big time. What happened? Remember those guys from before? Jaden's voice was shaky. Turns out they weren't done with me. Where are you? Silence. Then, downtown Marseille. Kylian's heart dropped. Marseille wasn't just rough, it was dangerous. Especially for someone with Jaden's past. I'm coming, Kylian said, already grabbing his jacket. Kylian, you don't have to. I'm coming. Chapter 7. Kylian's driver dropped him off at a dimly lit street corner in the roughest part of Marseille. The air was heavy with cigarette smoke and the distant sound of sirens. Jaden was leaning against a graffiti-covered wall, who had pulled over his head. His lip was swollen, and there was a cut above his eyebrow. Kylian crossed the street toward him. What the hell happened? Jaden shook his head. It's complicated. Uncomplicated. Jaden sighed and rubbed the back of his neck. I owed them money. I tried to pay them back, but things got messy. Kylian stepped closer. How much? Jaden's eyes darkened. Enough. Kylian didn't hesitate. I'll cover it. Jaden's expression hardened. No, I don't want your money. I'm not letting you get hurt over this, Kylian shot back. It's not that simple. Jaden's voice sharpened. He stepped back, breathing hard. These guys, they don't care about the money anymore. It's about control. About power. Kylian's jaw tightened. So what do we do? Jaden's eyes lifted toward a nightclub at the end of the street. Loud music pulsed from inside. A line of expensive cars sat parked out front. They're in there, Jaden said. And they don't forget. Kylian followed his gaze. Good, he said. I want them to remember this. Chapter 8. The bouncer at the door narrowed his eyes when Kylian and Jaden approached. You two lost. Kylian smiled. Just here for a chat. The bouncer crossed his arms. You're not on the list. Jaden leaned toward him. We don't need to be. The bouncer started to push them back, but Kylian shifted his weight and shot him a look. The kind of look you earn from leading France to a World Cup title. The bouncer hesitated, then stepped aside. Inside, the club was chaos, flashing lights, pounding bass, and cigarette smoke curling through the air. The VIP section was elevated on a platform above the dance floor, guarded by 2 men the size of linebackers. At the center of the VIP lounge sat the man Jaden owed, tall, slick hair, cold eyes. Kylian Mbappé, the man said, standing as Kylian and Jaden approached. Didn't expect to see you here. Consider me Jaden's agent, Kylian said. The man smiled thinly. You here to settle his debt? Kylian shook his head. I'm here to make you forget it. The man's smile widened. And how do you plan to do that? Kylian stepped forward. One-on-one. Me versus your best guy. If I win, you let Jaden walk. And if you lose? Kylian's eyes darkened. That's not going to happen. The man studied him for a long moment, then nodded toward the back of the club, where a small rooftop soccer cage sat under neon lights. You've got yourself a game. Chapter 9. Kylian's opponent was massive, easily 6'5", built like a tank. But Kylian wasn't relying on strength. He wasn't even relying on speed. He was relying on instinct. The game started fast. The opponent was aggressive, shoving Kylian off balance every time he got the ball. But Kylian stayed calm. He let his instincts take over. A step over. A quick cut left. He felt the rhythm, the pulse of the game. He was back in the alley with Jadon, playing free. The tank lunged at him, and Kylian slipped the ball through his legs with a perfect nutmeg. Jadon yelled from the sidelines. That's what I'm talking about. Kylian wasn't done. He spun, chipped the ball over his opponent's head, and smashed it into the top corner of the net. The club exploded in cheers. The tank dropped to his knees. Kylian turned toward the man in the suit. Debt settled. The man's smile faded. You got lucky. Kylian stepped closer. Try me again, and we'll see how lucky I am. The man's jaw clenched, but he backed off with a cold smile. Enjoy your win, Mbappé. Chapter 10. They were back on the street, the cool night air washing over them. Jadon laughed, shaking his head. You're insane. Kylian smiled. You're welcome. Jadon's expression softened. You really didn't have to do that. Yes, I did, Kylian said. Jadon glanced down at his feet, kicking a loose rock across the pavement. So, what now? Kylian's eyes narrowed. You tell me. Jadon grinned. You know, they've got a street tournament here in a couple of weeks. You could use a partner. Kylian raised an eyebrow. I've got training. So? Jadon grinned. You scared? Kylian laughed. Nope. Jadon tossed him a ball. Good. Let's see what you got. Chapter 11. The tournament was under the lights, the crowd packed into the street. Kylian and Jadon stood side by side, matching grins on their faces. Just like we practiced, Kylian said. Jadon smirked. Try to keep up. The whistle blew. The ball rolled toward them. Jadon flicked it toward Kylian, and he took off. No hesitation. No fear. He wasn't back. He was better. And this time, he wasn't doing it alone. Chapter 12. The ball snapped off Kylian's foot and curled perfectly into Jadon's path. Jadon took one touch, spun past his defender, and chipped the ball toward the top corner. It hit the crossbar and dropped into the net. The crowd erupted. Jadon jogged back toward Kylian, flashing that cocky grin of his. Lucky. Jadon teased. Kylian smirked. You've been learning from the best. Jadon tossed the ball toward him. We'll see about that. The street tournament was heating up. The semifinals were coming next, and the competition was brutal, quick-footed street legends and underground talent from all over Marseille. But Kylian and Jadon were untouchable. The chemistry they had built in the back alley games in LA was electric. Jadon had the flair, the unpredictable street style that left defenders embarrassed and scrambling. Kylian had the precision, the elite touch and composure of a World Cup champion. Together, they were unstoppable. As they walked off the makeshift pitch, Kylian's phone buzzed. A message from his agent. The club's calling. They need an answer. We'll talk after the final. Jadon noticed the shift in Kylian's expression. You good? Kylian pocketed his phone. Yeah, let's win this thing. Chapter 13. It was midnight when they got back to Jadon's apartment, a small place on the outskirts of town, windows half covered with tattered curtains. Jadon dropped onto the couch, stretching his legs out. You never miss, man. Even after the injury. Kylian leaned against the doorframe. It's not about missing. It's about feeling like myself again. Jadon sat up, studying him. And do you? Kylian hesitated. Yeah, for the first time in a long time. Jadon nodded slowly. So, what's next? Kylian's phone buzzed again. His agent. He ignored it. I don't know, Kylian admitted. Jadon raised an eyebrow. You mean the great Kylian Mbappé doesn't have a plan? Kylian smiled. First time for everything. Jadon's gaze sharpened. If it's about the club, you can't stay away forever. I know, Kylian said. But what? Kylian sighed. I don't want to just be Mbappé anymore. Jadon frowned. What does that even mean? Kylian ran a hand through his hair. For so long, it's been about the next record, the next trophy, the next contract. And it's like, I've done all that. I'm tired of playing for everyone else. So play for yourself, Jadon said simply. Kylian met his eyes. And what about you? Jadon's jaw tightened. What about me? You're too good to be playing in back alleys, Kylian said. You should be on a team. Jadon scoffed. Tried that. Didn't work out. Because you didn't have the right person backing you, Kylian said. Jadon shook his head. You don't get it, man. I don't have your name. Your connections. Your legacy. Guys like me, we don't make it. Kylian stepped closer. You made it with me. Jadon didn't answer. He just stared at the floor. Kylian sat down across from him. Let's win tomorrow. Then we'll figure the rest out. Jaden's lips curved into a small smile. Sounds like a plan. Chapter 14. The street was packed for the final. Hundreds of people lined the pavement, standing on cars and crates to get a better view. The organizers had set up floodlights over the makeshift pitch, casting long shadows across the worn asphalt. Kylian adjusted his hoodie, scanning the crowd. His agent was there, standing near the edge of the crowd, talking into his phone. Across the pitch, Jaden was juggling the ball, sharp and focused. Big turnout, Kylian said as he joined him. They're not here for me, Jaden said. Kylian grinned. They will be after tonight. Jaden's expression tightened. We win this, and maybe they remember our names. Or maybe they forget us tomorrow. Kylian put a hand on his shoulder. Then let's give them something they'll never forget. The whistle blew. The final was brutal. Fast, physical, and cutthroat. Their opponents were bigger and dirtier. Jaden took a hard elbow to the ribs early on, and Kylian was fouled every time he touched the ball. But they adjusted. Kylian slipped through defenders with quick 1-2s, feeding Jaden on the break. Jaden pulled off impossible dribbles, flipping the ball over opponents' heads and threading passes through narrow gaps. With 5 minutes left, the score was tied. Jaden trapped a loose ball at the edge of the box. 3 defenders closed in fast. Kylian saw the hesitation in Jaden's body language. Jaden! Kylian yelled. Jaden's eyes shot toward him. Kylian pointed toward the corner. Jaden smiled. Kylian took off. Jaden flicked the ball over a defender's head, spinning around the second. The ball bounced toward Kylian, perfect height. Kylian rose and met it with a powerful volley. The ball screamed into the top corner. Goal. The street exploded in cheers. Jaden tackled Kylian in celebration. You had to go for the dramatic finish? Jaden laughed. Kylian grinned. Always. Chapter 15. Later that night, as the crowd faded, Kylian and Jaden sat on the curb, sharing a bottle of water. Kylian's phone buzzed. His agent, again. You gonna answer that? Jaden asked. Kylian sighed. Then, he turned the phone off. Jaden's eyebrows rose. Seriously? Kylian smiled. I'm not ready to leave yet. Jaden's gaze narrowed. You're walking away from all that? Kylian shrugged. What if I stayed? What if we kept playing? Jaden frowned. Kylian. I'm serious, Kylian said. We'd kill it out here. Jaden laughed. Yeah, but you're Kylian Mbappé. And you're Jaden, Kylian said. Which means we'd be unstoppable. Jaden studied him for a long moment. Then he grinned. Let's see what you got. Kylian grabbed the ball and rolled it toward Jaden. Jaden trapped it under his foot. 1-on-1. Jaden asked. Kylian smiled. You really want to lose again? Jaden smirked. Let's find out. Jaden flicked the ball through Kylian's legs and took off down the street. Kylian laughed and sprinted after him. His knee didn't hurt. His heart was racing, but in the best way. This wasn't a comeback. This wasn't pressure. This was just the game. And for the first time in his life, he was playing free. Chapter 16. 2 weeks later, Kylian and Jaden were still in Marseille. Days filled with sunlit games on the street, and nights spent talking about everything except football, which was ironic, since that's what had brought them together. Jaden was sharper than ever. Kylian could see it in the way he moved faster, more confident. The hesitation was gone. He wasn't playing scared anymore. Your agent's gotta be losing his mind, Jaden said one afternoon as they sat on the steps of an old stadium, kicking a ball between them. Kylian smiled. He stopped calling. Seriously. Kylian leaned back, resting on his elbows. Yeah. He said if I don't give an answer soon, the club's going to start looking for other options. Jaden's smile faded. And what did you say? Kylian sighed. I didn't. Jaden frowned. Why? Kylian's gaze drifted toward the street, where a group of kids were playing barefoot. A scrappy little kid pulled off a quick step over and left his defender in the dust. Kylian smiled. Because this feels right, Kylian said. Jaden raised an eyebrow. Playing street football? Kylian shrugged. Why not? Because you're Kylian Mbappé, Jaden said. You're not supposed to be playing on the street with kids. You're supposed to be lifting trophies. Kylian's eyes sharpened. Maybe this is where I'm supposed to be. Jaden shook his head. Nah. Guys like you, you're meant for bigger things. Kylian stood and flicked the ball toward Jaden. I think you are too. Jaden laughed. Don't put that on me. Too late, Kylian smirked. Chapter 17. The next morning, Kylian woke up to find Jaden already gone. He checked his phone. No messages. Frowning, he headed toward the alley where they usually trained. Empty. Then he saw it, an envelope taped to the wall. Kylian ripped it off and opened it. Inside was a single piece of paper. Had to handle something. Don't follow me. Kylian's jaw tightened. He pulled out his phone and called Jayden. Straight to voicemail. That's when he heard a familiar voice behind him. You looking for him? Kylian turned. It was the same guy from the club, slick hair, cold eyes, flanked by 2 bodyguards. Kylian's fists clenched. Where is he? The man smiled. He owed me a game. Now he owes me something more. Kylian stepped toward him. Let him go. The man chuckled. It's not that simple. Kylian's eyes darkened. Then make it simple. The man's smile faded. He leaned closer. You want him back? Win him back. Kylian's brow furrowed. What are you talking about? The man nodded toward the old stadium down the street. 1 game, the man said. Me and my guys versus you. And Jayden. You win, he walks. You lose, you both stay. Kylian's jaw tightened. You're out of your mind, Kylian said. The man smiled thinly. Scared. Kylian's gaze hardened. Set it up. Chapter 18. It was dusk when Kylian arrived at the old stadium. The lights were flickering. The stands were empty except for a handful of shady figures sitting high in the shadows. Jayden was already there, sitting on the pitch, his hands tied behind his back. Kylian rushed toward him. You good? Jayden's face was bruised, but his eyes were sharp. I'm fine. Kylian's jaw tightened. This is insane. Jayden shook his head. They don't play fair. Then neither do we, Kylian said. The man in the suit walked onto the pitch, followed by 4 guys, all big, fast, and built like they belonged on an NFL roster. First to 3, the man said. No rules. Kylian helped Jayden to his feet. You sure about this? Jayden asked. Kylian smiled. We've been here before. Jayden's eyes narrowed. Yeah, but not like this. Kylian stepped toward the ball. Let's change the game. The whistle blew. The opposing team pressed fast, hard tackles, elbows, and late challenges. Kylian took a hard shoulder to the chest and hit the ground, gasping for breath. Jayden helped him up. You good? Kylian wiped blood from his lip. Yeah. Jayden grinned. Let's give them hell. Kylian's pass to Jayden was clean, but the defender closed fast. Jayden pulled off a quick spin, nutmegged the defender, and sent the ball toward Kylian. Kylian faked left, then cut back right and chipped the ball over the keeper. Goal. 1-0. The opposing team tightened up after that and got dirtier. Jayden took a hard knee to the ribs and dropped to the ground. Kylian ran to him. You okay? Jayden forced a breath. Yeah, keep going. Kylian's eyes darkened. He turned toward the opposing team and smiled coldly. They wanted to play rough? Fine. Jayden limped to his feet and Kylian nodded. Follow my lead, Kylian said. Jayden fed him the ball at the halfway line. 2 defenders closed fast. Kylian feinted left. They bit. Jayden ran the backdoor cut. Kylian slipped the ball through. Perfect weight. Perfect timing. Jayden flicked it over the keeper. Goal. 2-0. The opposing team was furious now. Hard tackles, dirty elbows, threats under their breath. Kylian wasn't intimidated. He was locked in. With 2 minutes left, the opposing striker caught Jayden from behind with a brutal tackle. Jayden crumpled to the ground. Kylian's eyes darkened. He picked up the ball and walked toward the penalty spot. You sure about this? Jayden said, holding his side. Kylian smiled. Always. The whistle blew. Kylian took 1 step, 2, and drilled the ball into the top corner. 3-0. Game over. Chapter 19. Kylian helped Jayden to his feet as the man in the suit stepped toward them. You win, the man said. Damn right I did, Kylian said. The man smiled faintly. You know, you're wasting your time with him. Kylian's eyes narrowed. Am I? Jayden met his gaze. The man sighed. Suit yourself. He turned and disappeared into the shadows. Kylian turned to Jayden. You all right? Jayden grinned. Yeah. You sure? Jayden laughed. I've never been more sure. Kylian smiled. Good. Jayden's eyes sharpened. So what now? Kylian's smile widened. We keep playing. Chapter 20. 2 weeks later, Kylian and Jayden were walking toward a packed street pitch in Barcelona. Jayden spun the ball on his finger. You ready? Jayden asked. Kylian smiled. Always. The whistle blew. Jayden flicked the ball toward Kylian. Kylian took off. And this time, nothing was holding him back. Chapter 21. It was raining in Barcelona. Hard. The kind of rain that soaked through your clothes and stung when it hit your face. Kylian and Jayden stood under the flickering lights of a back alley street pitch. A crowd gathered, umbrellas raised, Hoods pulled low. The match was tied. Next goal wins. Jaden's breath was ragged. His hoodie was soaked through. Kylian could see the exhaustion in his eyes, but there was something else too. Fear. Jaden, Kylian said. What's going on? Jaden wiped rain from his face. His hands were shaking. They're here, Jaden whispered. Kylian's eyes narrowed. Who's here? Jaden's gaze drifted toward the edge of the pitch, to the shadows beyond the streetlights. And then Kylian saw them. A dark figure leaned against a parked car. Then another. And another. Faces hidden beneath hoods. Watching. Waiting. The man in the suit stepped forward, lit by the glow of a streetlight. Same cold eyes. Same thin smile. You really thought you were done, the man said. Jaden's jaw tightened. We had a deal. The man shook his head. The deal was for the game. This is about business. Kylian stepped in front of Jaden. He doesn't owe you anything. The man smiled thinly. He does now. What the hell are you talking about? Kylian said. Jaden's hand trembled at his side. Kylian. I didn't tell you everything. Kylian's stomach tightened. What? Jaden took a breath. They didn't just want money. They wanted leverage. Kylian's eyes narrowed. Leverage. Jaden's gaze fell to the ground. Me? Being close to you? It wasn't an accident. Kylian's heart stopped. What are you saying? Jaden's voice broke. They told me to get close to you. To make you trust me. Kylian's chest tightened. No. Jaden's eyes darkened. That first night in L.A. I knew who you were. Kylian shook his head. You're lying. Jaden's lips parted. He looked broken. I didn't want to do it. But I didn't have a choice. They said if I didn't, they'd kill me. Kylian stumbled back a step, like the ground had been pulled out from under him. You lied to me, Kylian said, his voice sharp. I didn't have a choice. Jaden shouted. Kylian's hands curled into fists. His heart was racing. All of it, the training, the games, was it all fake? No. Jaden's voice cracked. That was real. You have to believe me. Kylian's head was spinning. His heart hammered against his ribs. The man in the suit stepped closer. See? This is what happens when you trust the wrong people. Kylian's eyes flashed toward him. You used him, Kylian growled. The man smiled. And it worked. Jaden's eyes filled with desperation. Kylian, please. But Kylian's walls were up now. His breath sharpened. His jaw clenched. You played me, Kylian said coldly. No, Jaden whispered. But Kylian was already walking away. Chapter 22. 2 weeks passed. Kylian was back in Paris. Back at PSG. Everything should have felt normal, but it didn't. He trained hard. He played harder. He scored goals. The papers called it Mbappe's comeback. They said he looked sharper, stronger. But Kylian knew better. He wasn't playing for the love of the game anymore. He was playing to forget. To forget him. Jaden had tried to reach out. Texts. Calls. Kylian ignored them all. Then one day, a package arrived at Kylian's apartment. No return address. Inside was a letter. And a single, folded photograph. Kylian unfolded the letter first. Kylian. I know you hate me. I don't blame you. I screwed up. I lied to you. But you need to know, they're not done. They're coming for you next. This wasn't just about me. It was always about you. Please, trust me one last time. If I'm wrong, you'll never have to see me again. But if I'm right, you'll need me. Don't come looking for me. I'll find you when it's time. The signature at the bottom was simple, Jaden. Kylian's hands tightened around the paper. Then he unfolded the photograph. It was a grainy black and white image, Jaden standing next to the man in the suit. And behind them, Kylian's stomach dropped. Behind them was Kylian's agent, smiling, hand outstretched, shaking the man's hand. Kylian's heart slammed against his chest. His agent. His own agent had been part of it all along. Kylian's phone buzzed. A text from his agent. Meeting tomorrow. We'll discuss the next contract. Kylian's hands curled into fists. His chest tightened. Jaden wasn't lying. And now Kylian was part of the game. Chapter 23. Kylian showed up to the meeting the next morning, his face emotionless. His agent was sitting behind a large glass desk, a bright skyline stretching behind him. Kylian, the agent said warmly. Glad you're here. Kylian sat down. His gaze sharpened. You lied to me, Kylian said. The agent's smile faded. I don't know what you're talking about. Kylian tossed the photograph onto the desk. The agent's expression didn't change. You're in deep, aren't you? Kylian said. The agent sighed. Kylian, you don't understand how this business works. Kylian's jaw tightened. I understand more than you think. The agent leaned forward. They only ever wanted one thing, Kylian. You. Kylian's chest tightened. You think this is about football? The agent continued. This is about control. About power. You're not just an athlete, you're a brand. And they own brands. Not me, Kylian said coldly. The agent smiled. You sure about that? Kylian's heart raced. His breath sharpened. Walk away, Kylian, the agent said. You can't win this fight. Kylian stood slowly. You're right, he said. I can't win alone. The agent's smile faded. Kylian pulled out his phone and sent a single text. I'm in. Let's end this. The agent's eyes narrowed. Who did you just text? Kylian smiled. And behind him, the door opened. Jaden stepped through. Hey, Jaden said with a grin. Miss me? Kylian's eyes sharpened. Let's change the game. Jaden's smile widened. Let's break it. The agent's face darkened. And Kylian knew, this time, they were playing by their own rules. Chapter 24. The agent's smile faded into something cold and calculating. His eyes narrowed as Jaden stepped into the room, hands tucked into the pockets of his hoodie. Jaden, the agent said flatly. I thought we agreed you were done. Jaden smirked. Yeah, well, plans change. Kylian's gaze was razor sharp. You lied to me. The agent's expression didn't shift. I told you the truth. You just didn't want to hear it. Kylian's jaw tightened. You tried to use me. I wasn't the only one, the agent said, his gaze flicking toward Jaden. Jaden's smirk faded. Kylian's fists curled. Enough games. What's the endgame here? The agent leaned back in his chair. Endgame? He smiled faintly. Kylian, you're the endgame. The most marketable athlete in the world. Your name is currency. Your talent is leverage. You think you can control me? Kylian growled. The agent's eyes darkened. I don't have to. You play, we win. It's that simple. Kylian's heart hammered. His breath sharpened. He took a step forward. And if I don't? The agent's smile returned. You think walking away is an option? A click sounded behind Kylian. Jaden's eyes widened. Kylian. Kylian turned as two men stepped into the room, suits, cold eyes, guns beneath their jackets. Kylian's heart slammed against his chest. You've built too much, the agent said softly. Too much money. Too much fame. You think they'll just let you walk? Jaden's jaw clenched. He stepped toward Kylian. We're getting out of here, Jaden whispered. Kylian's gaze sharpened. How? Jaden smiled faintly. Follow my lead. Chapter 25. Jaden's hand shot toward the nearest guard's arm. He twisted hard, a crack of bone, and the man screamed, dropping his gun. Kylian didn't hesitate. He slammed his shoulder into the second guard, knocking him against the glass wall. The glass spiderwebbed with cracks. The agent stood, his expression cold. You really think this is going to work? Jaden grabbed the gun from the floor and pointed it at the agent's chest. Yeah, I do. The agent's lips curved into a thin smile. You won't shoot me. Jaden's hand didn't shake. Try me. You don't have the nerve, the agent said softly. Jaden's hand twitched. His jaw tightened. Kylian stepped forward. He put a hand on Jaden's arm. Not like this, Kylian said. Jaden's breathing was sharp and uneven. He lowered the gun. We're not them, Kylian said. Jaden's gaze softened. Yeah, you're right. The agent's smile widened. Kylian turned toward the window. He could hear footsteps coming down the hall. More men. Jaden's eyes flashed toward him. Got a plan. Kylian's gaze sharpened. Always. He took 2 quick steps toward the window and launched himself through the glass. The window exploded into a rain of shattered glass. Kylian twisted mid-air, catching the edge of the fire escape with one hand. Jaden followed, dropping down behind him as glass scattered into the alley below. Shouts erupted from the building above. Jaden grinned. That was reckless. Kylian smirked. You're welcome. They hit the ground running. Jaden vaulted over a dumpster. Kylian followed, cutting left down a narrow alley. Behind them, tires screeched. A black SUV slid into the alley, headlights blinding. Go! Kylian shouted. Jaden darted toward a chain-link fence. He climbed fast, twisting over the top and landing on the other side. Kylian followed, but as he landed, a dark figure stepped in front of him. The agent. Enough, the agent said coldly. This is over. Kylian's eyes flashed. Jaden's voice cut through the dark. Hey. Jaden stood on the roof of a nearby car. He tossed the gun toward the ground, and a second later, it fired. The agent flinched. Kylian lunged forward. He slammed his fist into the agent's jaw. The man stumbled, and Kylian shoved him hard against the alley wall. Jaden grabbed Kylian's arm. We gotta go. Kylian hesitated, then turned and ran. They disappeared into the dark. Chapter 26. It was 2 days later. Kylian stood on the balcony of a small apartment in Barcelona, looking out over the rooftops. His phone sat on the table behind him. Missed calls. His agent. PSG. The club president. He ignored them all. Jadon leaned against the doorway behind him. So what now? Kylian's gaze sharpened. We ended. Jadon frowned. How? Kylian's smile was thin and dangerous. By burning it down. Jadon's eyes narrowed. You're serious? Kylian turned. They want me? Fine. Let's make them come and get me. Jadon crossed his arms. And when they do? Kylian's eyes darkened. We finish this. Chapter 27. 2 weeks later, Kylian showed up for a press conference at the Parc des Princes. The stadium was packed with reporters. Cameras flashed as he stepped onto the stage. Jadon stood in the shadows of the tunnel, watching. Kylian adjusted the mic. His gaze was cold. I'm making an announcement, Kylian said. The reporters leaned forward. I'm leaving PSG. The room exploded in chaos. Shouts. Flashbulbs. Kylian raised a hand, and the room fell silent. I've given everything to this club, he said. But I've learned that the game I love, it's not about football anymore. Jadon's eyes sharpened. I won't be part of it, Kylian said. Not anymore. A reporter called out. What are you going to do next? Kylian's gaze drifted toward Jadon. He smiled faintly. I'm going to play the game the way it was meant to be played. Kylian stepped away from the podium. The room erupted with questions, but Kylian didn't stop. Jadon met him at the tunnel. That's it? Jadon asked. Kylian smiled. Not even close. Jadon grinned. So what's next? Kylian's eyes flashed. There's a street tournament in Rio next month, Kylian said. Jadon laughed. You serious? Kylian smirked. You coming? Jadon's gaze sharpened. You know it. They walked toward the stadium exit together. Jadon passed him the ball. Kylian caught it with the outside of his foot. So, Jadon said, first to 3. Kylian's smile widened. You're going down. They disappeared into the tunnel. 2 shadows moving toward the light. And for the first time, they were playing by their own rules. The end. Smiling face with sunglasses fire.